This is Thank You Mama, weekly lessons from mothers all around the world. Dear friends all over the world, I am relaunching the Thank You Mama newsletter and filling it with information and inspiration I am super excited about and would really love to share with you. You'll find a subscription link in episode notes on my website or in my Instagram link in bio. And finally, if you're enjoying the show and haven't done so yet, please give it 5 stars and a review. It's simple and quick, but it really helps the show to be discovered and to grow. Thank you so much for being here. And here's this week's beautiful conversation. Hello and welcome to Thank You Mama. My name is Anna Teider. My guest today is Kanchan Koya. Kanchan combines her PhD in molecular biology from Harvard and her training from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition to bring healing spices and their health benefits to kids and families. She created the Spice Baby cookbook, in which she educates her readers about health benefits of spices and creating simple and delicious recipes for them to use at their homes. Kanchan, hi and welcome.
Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored and excited to be here.
I am very excited to have you here and learn more about spices and your work. Also about your mama, of course.
Yeah, same.
Tell me about this topic. It's so unique what you're doing, bringing spices to mamas and babies and educating families about the benefits of spices. And what I also find very interesting is taking the fear away from spices, because I think many of us in Western world are like, oh my God, I won't be able to cook with it, or it will be too spicy for me. Thank you for doing that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, you're welcome. And it's exactly that fear of spices that I sensed when I became a mom and I started to offer spices to my now 10-year-old as a 6-month-old baby. And I sensed this fear and uncertainty and trepidation among my fellow mom friends here in New York City who felt intimidated by spices, who felt like they didn't really know how to use them or whether they should even use them, and definitely were concerned about the spiciness factor. I realized there was really an opportunity to educate people about these very magical gifts from nature. And I know that sounds dramatic and poetic, but we all are interested in the power of food for healing, food as medicine, especially after everything we've been through collectively with COVID, that really made us realize like health is wealth. And we know that, of course, medication has a place and modern medicine has a place, but ultimately what we do every day, what we eat every day, how we live every day really impacts how we respond to disease and how resilient we can be. And so we have all been interested in food as medicine. We've become more interested in that. And to me, spices are the ultimate kind of gateway into the world of food as medicine. So spices are part of food. We don't usually eat spices on their own. We usually mix them with food. And cultures have been doing so for thousands of years. And of course, they have done so for flavor, but they've also recognized that spices are some of the most potent kind of components from nature that you can use in food with really concentrated health benefits. So small amounts of spices can have, tremendous health benefits, tremendously high concentrations of what we call phytochemicals or plant-derived chemicals. And these chemicals can actually interact with your cells, with the molecules in your body to have beneficial effects. Sometimes some toxic effects, very rarely, but mostly really profound benefits. So I saw the fear and the trepidation and the hesitancy as an opportunity to bring the food as medicine world into focus through the spice lens for moms, families, and really for every home cook. And so, yeah, that was kind of what inspired the journey. And it's been, what should I say? It's been as exhilarating for me as a teacher, educator, as it has hopefully for my audience.
But what I wanted to ask you, I recently heard a podcast, one of my favorite podcasts called On Being with Krista Tippett, and she had a nutritionist as her guest there who talked about studies that apparently prove, I think they did studies in prisons across Europe, maybe even Europe and Australia, I think, that have proven that with nutrition, we can change the well-being and behavior and decrease aggression in people. This is powerful. Have you heard about that?
So that particular study I have not heard of. That's super interesting, and I will look it up. But it doesn't surprise me, because what we are learning is that there is a very, very close, inextricable link between our gut and our gut microbiome and our brain. People used to think of these organs, if you will, as separate, but we really know that everything is very integrated. Our brain is speaking very closely to our gut. Our gut is speaking very closely to our brain. Our gut is speaking very closely to all our bodily systems. And we know that nutrition has a very, very powerful impact on the gut microbiome and our gut health. And so if we positively impact those gut microbes, they reward us with certain chemicals which can actually travel to your brain and affect inflammation in the brain. They can affect our mood, because mood disorders may be linked to dysregulated inflammation in the brain. So it doesn't surprise me, but that's amazing that they actually found that in a real-time study, because sometimes you wonder how long these interventions would take to have an effect, but it sounds like they observed an effect in real time, which is incredible.
I think it's so fascinating, and it was high time. Now I'm reading more and more studies, and more connection is being shown between our gut and our health generally, but also, as you say, our brain, depression, even Alzheimer's. It's beautiful that we are starting to pay more attention to our food and the power that it has.
Precisely, and it's very empowering, because sometimes we can feel helpless in the face of these neurological changes, or we feel like we've just been handed like a not so great deck of cards when it comes to maybe our mood and our proclivities. But we have really the power to change things through diet and lifestyle, which I think is very empowering.
Do you have a favorite spice for mamas with little babies or young children?
I definitely say turmeric is like a wonderful spice to start, because one is, it's probably the most well-studied spice. Lots of research into the health benefits of turmeric, specifically its bioactive compound curcumin, for inflammation, brain health, gut health, and so on. It's also quite mild. Going back to this issue of spice fear and like, oh, all spices are spicy. How could I even remotely think about giving it to my baby or kid? All spices are not spicy, right? Aside from the chili peppers and maybe the black pepper family, spices are flavorful. They are aromatic. They have complex flavor notes, but they're not really hot. I mean, think of cinnamon, cumin, coriander, sumac, which is used in the Middle East, which is like lemony and bright. So spices have tons of flavor. They're not always spicy. And turmeric actually is pretty mild. It's earthy, pretty hard to really detect, and packed with benefits. So I think of it as a great starter spice for kids and families. And you can add it to a lot of different things. If you're making some mashed lentils and avocado, that could be a really nice addition. If you're making some cauliflower or potato, peas and carrots, which are really popular with babies. If you're steaming some broccoli and you want to drizzle it with a little olive oil that's been infused with some turmeric, it's just a way to really add some of those antioxidants and phytonutrients in a way that is not overly, what should I say, challenging for the baby's palate.
And so much more information on your website, as I detected.
Yes,
on
my
how
book,
to do
and
this. Yeah.
absolutely lots of ideas on my blog, spicespicebaby.com, in the book, and on my Instagram as well.
Before we start talking about Mama, how did this journey start? How did you decide, or what led to your PhD in molecular biology?
I knew I was fascinated by biology, DNA, molecular biology pretty young. I remember vividly my eighth grade teacher in India, that's where I grew up, started talking about DNA and the structure and the bases and how essentially the sequence of bases makes genes, which kind of make you who you are. And I was like, that is just blowing my mind. So I kind of knew that I wanted to study that. I was also interested in disease prevention. I wanted to reduce the disease burden, if you will, in the population. And so science felt like a really great way to indulge my love of molecular biology and hopefully learn something that could impact disease risk in the population. So I would say it was pretty early and I followed through. I did my bachelor's in molecular biology. I worked in a research lab between undergraduate and graduate school. And then I found myself at Harvard Medical School in their PhD program. And it's probably the hardest thing I ever did, but also the most rewarding. And, I'm so grateful that was my journey because I learned so much. And I really do feel like I bring it to bear in my work as a sort of nutrition educator that I think there's a lot of nutrition noise out there. And I don't say that I know everything, but I say I'm always learning and I do have the ability to discern what is real from what is just hyperbole and sort of sensationalism, which we have a lot of these days in nutrition.
It's beautifully straightforward story, Kanchan, because I often hear life stories. They're like, and then this happened, and then this. It's very refreshing to hear somebody's like, no, I knew from early on I want to do this, and I did this.
Right. I mean, there is one little point, which is, I come from a traditional Indian family that really values academia and academics. And so I was definitely on a path that was very synced up with my family's expectations. And when I finished at Harvard, I was doing biotechnology stuff, like using my PhD to find novel therapeutics. And it made a lot of sense to my family. It made a lot of sense to me. It was like the safe thing to do. But this kind of jumping ship to the world of food as medicine initially was very scary for me because I felt like I was selling out and I felt like I was letting a lot of people down. I even remember a conversation with my brother, who's a big cheerleader of mine now, but he was like, how are you going to throw away your PhD at Harvard and teach people how to cook? Like, that doesn't really add up. So I had to go through that journey of like self-exploration and accepting what really felt like my soul's calling. Like, I really feel like I'm meant to be at this intersection of two worlds, like food and health. And now it looks great and like makes a lot of sense. But when I was making the transition, it wasn't easy.
This was the topic of my last few days of my conversations with various guests. And I was a guest on a podcast called Reinvention Rebels that talks about this, reinventing yourself. It's scary.
Very, very scary. Especially, I think for everyone. And once you're on the other side and things have kind of found some momentum, you can look back and say, oh, wow. But in the moment, it's sometimes paralyzing and you can't actually make the switch and you can't actually follow through. And for anyone who's in the midst of it, just trust that it's like moving despite the fear that is key.
Yes, yes. And you know what I've learned? Listening to your guts. Your guts know. And if it feels right to you, then it's right.
Absolutely. We tend to be so stuck in our heads.
Exactly.
And if we just get in a little bit more into our heart and our body and like really trust that intuition, let that be the guide. Like, how do you feel when you think you're going to say yes to something versus no to something? How does that feel in your body versus your mind,
Absolutely. When did you make the transition from India to the US?
So I came to the US when I was 18 for college. And I, have been here ever since. But yeah, I've now lived in the US longer than I lived in India. So, it's hard to say what is home. They're both home. But definitely the US is where I have become an adult and built a family and planted roots. So I feel very connected to both India and the US, but I would say the US now is home.
This is a beautiful segue to talking about your mom. Is she in India? Or is she in the US?
She is in India.
What is her name?
Her name is Shohba. That's Shobha, Shohba, which means beautiful, beauty. Yeah, she's very special. And I feel like my relationship with her has really morphed, over time as I've become a mom.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm sort of smiling. You can't see, just thinking about her right now in India.
Tell me about her. What was her life like? Where does she come from? What is her story?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Her life, like a lot of parents of Indians of my age, especially in the northern part of India, there was a lot of early trauma and turmoil because my mom actually, her family is originally from Pakistan,
Mm-hmm.
and we are Sindhi, which is a province in
Mm-hmm.
Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
And, as we know from Indian history, in 1947, India was divided by the British before they left into India and Pakistan. It was one country, and then it was divided along religious lines. So my mother was actually born in 1948. So her parents had to flee Pakistan as refugees because of religious turmoil and religious infighting. So she came into the world in 1948, I think, in a pretty stressful environment. I don't know if my grandmother was already pregnant with her when she fled Pakistan to come to India, but I do sense and feel both on my mom and dad's side, there was a lot of early trauma and turmoil and psychological turmoil. So that was kind of the setting of the stage for her life. That said, she grew up in India. She seems to, from what she tells me, have had a very rich childhood. She was a bookworm.
Mm-hmm.
She read every book on the planet. She was extremely motivated academically, very bright. In fact, she came in the top 5 people in India, like in her 10th grade exam, which I kind of blows my mind. I didn't even know there was such a thing, but she was, a nerd and a bookworm and like obsessed with Shakespeare and knew all of Shakespeare. And yeah, just was like a very enthusiastic learner and student. And so that was really like her childhood. She was also deeply interested in poetry
Mm-hmm.
and continued on to study English literature, did a master's in English literature with comparative poetry in India. So definitely followed through on that passion. Very different interests from mine, but I think kind of knew intuitively what she loved.
What happened then? Did she work in her field?
So she worked in her field. Then she met my dad in an arranged marriage, which was fairly typical in the
Yeah.
1970s in
Yeah.
India. And she stopped working when she was pregnant with my brother. So she was teaching at the university in
Mm-hmm.
Pune, which is my hometown,
Mm-hmm.
close to Mumbai. And she was teaching literature to university students. And once she became a mom or was pregnant with my brother, she decided collectively with my dad that it was, the best decision to give up her career for now and focus on being a mom. And when I say that, it like breaks my heart because she never quite went back. Like, I think it
Mm-hmm.
was just very hard for her to go back because then my brother came and then I was born, and there just weren't too many role models at the time in the 80s in India for women who were able to sustain both kind of paths of
Mm-hmm.
motherhood and, their professional interests. So she basically gave up her professional interest and her life as an English teacher, English professor, English lover to really dedicate herself to being a mom. And she was a very dedicated, amazing mom.
I love it how you say that it breaks your heart, because sometimes women think we do our children a favor if we put our professional lives into a drawer for being a mom. But it's interesting how often children later say, no, that was a shame.
Absolutely. And at the time, we obviously loved that she was
Yes. Yeah.
completely 100% available, accessible, around. But, you can also sense, I think, as a child, if your mother is entirely at peace and content in her life. And I did feel, she never verbalized it, but I did feel like she felt like something was missing. And it was probably that she wasn't able to fully unleash her creativity
Mm-hmm.
and fulfill
Mm-hmm.
her passion. And so even though she was fully present and had sacrificed it, I sensed something was missing. So yes, I think that's so important to bring up because as moms we can feel guilty
Yes. Yeah.
But we're setting an example for our kids that this, we can do both.
Exactly. I had the opposite situation with my mom. My mom had two careers that she was following very, very passionately. And sometimes, of course, being a mother or a parent came short. There were no prepared lunches
Right.
in my school bag. There were no, I don't know, breakfasts in the morning. There were no dinners. And when I was younger, I was a little upset about that. And I thought, especially when I was a kid and I would go to my friend's house and see the other way. But when I grew up, and especially when I became a mom, I realized how amazing it is that I have a mom who is a role model in that way. And that I think I would miss her being so successful and having a two parallel passionate careers much more than I missed her making me sandwiches for school,
Yeah, no, absolutely. It can go both ways, and that's amazing that you can see that now about your mom.
Yes, definitely. How is she now?
So she's 75. She's turning 75 in September.
Yeah.
Knock on wood. She is great in the sense, 75, she's older, but she is very active. She really takes care of herself. So she's doing great, but she never quite found her way back to her true love, which was English literature. I mean, she reads and she does occasionally write poetry, and I've been encouraging her to send all her poems to me so I can put them in a book for her 75th birthday.
Oh, that's beautiful. Did you do that?
I am pushing her to send me the poems. Her birthday's in September. I would think it would be lovely for her because, my mom is a perfectionist. And so she feels like, oh, they're probably not good enough. But I told her we'll just put it in a book for us. Like, we don't have to try to win like a Nobel Prize for it. Let's just put them in a one place, even just for the family and the grandkids. So I'm pushing her to do it. But yes, like I said, I do feel like it was just very hard for her to find her way back to her true love of literature and kind of do something with it. She just got very caught up in motherhood, and by the time we left for college, I think she had lost momentum. So,
what do you feel are the most important things you learned from her?
Yeah. So first of all, I am married, happily married with 2 kids, but my mom told me very, very young, which was quite unusual to hear in the Indian context when I was growing up there, was don't make marriage a goal. Everyone gets married. It's like no big deal, nothing to aspire to. And, she actually used to say in her words, every donkey gets married.
I love it so much.
And, this was like flying in the face of everyone else's mom's advice at the time, which was like everything in the 80s and 90s in India was like about how to become the model bride for the perfect marriage, which was going to somehow set you up for a life of success. And I think my mom was a bit of a rebel. And maybe it's because she felt like she had to make this choice between her career and her family that she didn't want me to have to make that same sacrifice. And she didn't know that there was the possibility of the two coexisting. So she tried to almost like push me more in the direction of pursuing my passion, pursuing my career, and not being so focused on getting married and having a family right away. So I do appreciate that because I did focus on my career. I did my PhD. I got married at like 29, which is now pretty normal. But for an Indian back then would have been like very old. So I appreciate that perspective. And it has really stayed with me because I've never thought about the model of having to give one up for the other. I really taken what she wrote or said between the lines and really try to create a life where I can have both things. And I'm really grateful to her for that kind of perspective and wisdom, which was counter to the culture. The second thing I would say is my mom's attention to detail is like sort of unparalleled. I like to think of it as maybe her Virgo trait. But growing up, I used to find the attention to detail exasperating, annoying. I used to get impatient. For example, my mom loves to buy fruit in India from the fruit stand. And I feel like we live in a world now where we are in such a rush that if you are buying fruit, you're standing near the apple section and you're just grabbing a couple of apples and you're like running out the checkout. My mom will stand there and really pick out like the apples that she thinks she wants to bring home to her family or to herself. And she will look at them. She will try to find like the three perfect ones. She'll, look through all the leafy green vegetables. And I still remember standing there, like patting, tapping my feet in impatience, going, come on, mom, it doesn't matter. Like, just take the apple. And I think it's not just the apples. It's not just the fruit. She's that way about anything. If she's making a lentil dish like a dal, she will be very precise about the way she chops the cilantro or the amount of time she exposes the cumin seeds to the oil and how pink the garlic is before she tips it into the dal. And again, back in the day, I was like, oh gosh, it can't really matter. But I do think that attention to detail is special. I think it helps you slow down, be less in a rush. And certain things do turn out better because you paid attention to detail. So I think I've learned that from her because I'm a little bit like, whatever, it doesn't matter. That seems to be my sort of inherent disposition. So I'm grateful to her for teaching me how that can be a valuable tool, when you're trying to be creative, when you're trying to do anything really.
Do you think, because it sounds to me like being centered and focused as well, does that go hand in hand with that lesson? It sounds to me like she's really, when she's doing something, she's very present.
100%. She is not scattered like I am. She just comes from a time where whatever was going on in that moment was the only thing that was real. That was the only thing that was happening. And you just were 100% in it and devoted to it and almost treat it as like sacred and, really give it all your attention. So I think that is a beautiful lesson, to be fully present with whatever is happening right now.
We all need to learn that and continuously be reminded of it.
Yes.
Do you have more?
Yeah, I feel like what I've also learned from her is self-care. So even though she sacrificed a lot of her passions to be a mother, I did always see her invest in self-care, whether it was like a yoga practice that she did. I became very interested in yoga myself. I watched her do yoga pretty regularly. I would watch her really pay attention to nutrition and what she ate. She always went for a brisk walk in the neighborhood garden. Even now at 75, she must make time for her walk. She must make time for a really hearty breakfast. She'll take the time to cut her fruit and sit down and eat it. And we can see self-care as self-indulgent. We can see it as self-absorbed, or we can see it as a really beautiful practice because it is really hard to pour from an empty cup. And I think she's also very good at knowing when she needs to slow down and rest, which again, in our culture is something we have forgotten. So after lunch and cleanup, she would always kind of lie down for like a little siesta. She wouldn't actually sleep, but she felt it was really important to rest the body. And I watched her do these things. And now that I'm in my 40s and I have two kids and I'm like running around like a headless chicken a lot of the time, I do find myself saying, okay, I have 30 minutes in the afternoon. What if I put my feet up and just like take a minute? And I do feel like it's watching her make that time for self-care that I've internalized and I'm hopefully putting into good practice now with, beneficial results for myself, but also my family, my kids, and everyone around me.
Kanchan, I'm so grateful for this and so excited about this lesson because I've conducted around 120 interviews until now with women from all over the world. And I also ask, which I will ask you later, what are some things you wish your mom taught you? What was something important she wasn't able to teach you? There are three things that come up most often: sex and my body, finances, but also self-care. It's interesting to hear women repeat over and over again, no matter where in the world, no matter what culture, no matter what generation, no matter what circumstances they grew up, they always say, my mom never showed me self-care. She didn't teach me self-care. She was always there for others. And women miss that a lot. And they really consciously mention that as something they wish they learned. It's beautiful to hear that you've learned that from your mom.
Yes, I do feel lucky, especially now that I'm actually able to put it into practice myself.
Do you have more lessons before we go into something she maybe wasn't able to teach you?
Yes, I think the final lesson I'll share is my mom loves fashion and she loves putting herself together nicely for a lunch with friends or a dinner party. And, I think again, you can see these things as superficial, not that important, but I think it is really nice to invest that time in picking out a pair of lovely earrings that someone gifted you and pulling out a scarf that brings you joy and putting it all together and show and like really presenting yourself in a way that makes you happy and feel confident. And I do feel like I've inherited a love for fashion and jewelry and again, not it can go like too far where that's all you care about. But I like to think I have a healthy balance. And people always say, like, you're so fashionable. And, it brings me joy. I like to dress for my mood. I like to be creative with my clothes. I like to put things together in new ways and throw on like a different lipstick on one day. So I definitely learned that from her. And she's still at 75, looks amazing and really knows how to put together a great outfit. So
I'm going to go tomorrow and buy a new lipstick. Thanks to your
should.
mom. I need a fun colored lipstick.
Yes, it's an immediate mood boost.
It is, isn't it? But then let's go to the topic of something that she was not able to teach you. Do you have anything you wish she taught you, something you had to learn yourself?
Yeah, I don't know if it was just her, but I definitely grew up in a culture that was really focused on performance and excellence. And it's a beautiful thing. And I do think that I was able to follow through with the expectations. And I did really well, quote unquote, well in my life, academically and whatnot. But I do wish that there was more of a sharing of a perspective that productivity and excellence and performance are great things to strive for. But we don't have the perspective that it's also okay to just be. It's also okay to take a break. It's also okay to fail. I think that acceptance of failure.
Oh, wow.
And maybe it's because she was never really, someone who was good at that with herself. And it was also not the messaging she received. So again, I don't fault her for it. I think it's very much the culture.
Yeah, the culture.
My family lineage. Everyone has like always been a striver and very excellent and very productive and very good at what they do. But sometimes that can be really exhausting. And also keep you from trying new things because new things inherently require a bit of an appetite for failure. So I find myself to be actually quite afraid of failure because I need to kind of, hit the ground running on day one. And that's not always how it works, especially with things that are difficult or challenging or innovative. So yeah, I do wish I had been taught or there were examples for me on how sometimes it's okay to slow down, sometimes it's okay to fail, sometimes it's okay to do nothing. And so that would be what I wish I learned. And I'm sort of teaching myself that now.
Are you teaching your children?
Very much so. This idea, I also feel like it's part of the culture now. Like at my son's school, there is a huge emphasis on this idea of the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. And how, we're always changing and always growing and expanding and contracting. And it's like, there is no idea of like, I'm good at this. It's like, you are good at this now, but you could be good at something else in a few weeks if you put your mind to it or like it. Yeah, it's like we have the ability to expand our skill sets. And just because we're not good at something now, first of all, doesn't make us deficient, but also doesn't make us stuck in a particular bucket. So I'm trying. But my kids, my 10-year-old will draw something and then be like, I'm a horrible artist because it's so ugly. So he's very hard on himself. And I have to tell him, no one was born like drawing like Picasso or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, so I'm trying.
Kanchan, thank you so much. This was really very inspiring and interesting. Do you have anything else you'd like to add before we recap?
I mean, I'll just say that our relationships with our mothers can be complex. They can sometimes be fraught with difficulty, kind of connecting, engaging. It ebbs and flows. But once you become a mom, you really realize how much your mother had to go through, especially in those times, to make it all make sense and make work. So I'm just kind of overcome with gratitude. My mom is not perfect, but I'm not perfect either. And I feel like all I feel now for her is immense gratitude and sort of love and compassion. And I just want to maximize all my time with her, which is hard because she's in India, but I will be seeing her this summer. So I'm excited about that.
How often do you get to see her?
Given how far away we live, I get to see her pretty often. I would say 3 to 4 times a year, which is lovely. I wish it were way more often. I envy people whose mothers live like around the block, but I'll take the 3 to 4 times and really try to be so present in those moments to really kind of extract as much as I can from the time I have with her.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really a great chat, and I love your podcast, and I love that you're having these conversations. They're so important, and really, really glad to be here.
So important because, as you said, you know, they inspire us to start thinking about our mothers and our mothers' lives and where they come from and what they gave us and what were they not able to give us because of their own lives and circumstances and culture. So
yes,
it's very important to look back and try to understand. I think that's beautiful. Help me to quickly recap. I love the first lesson. Don't make marriage a goal. Every donkey gets married. I love that so much. And I think every mom has to tell this to her daughter, which helped you to pursue passions and your career and other things before you felt you were ready to get married and start a family. And I think it's also maybe packed into that was the message which she couldn't model for you, which is you can do it all. Just try it all.
Yes.
I love how you spoke about the attention to detail, which you, when you were young, found annoying, but that helps us to slow down. And as you said, that was very interesting. It helps us to make things better, to make better things. Things turn out better when we concentrate on details. And we spoke there about being in the moment as well, being present and using this attention to detail as just focusing, which we need to learn and relearn over and over again. The beautiful lesson of self-care. And I love it how it doesn't have to be very complicated. It can be nutrition, walks, as you said, a beautiful breakfast, or just taking a rest when you need it. And fashion, which I absolutely share with you. I think it's so beautiful. It's funny moving to Austria where women don't care so much. I see the opposite, you know. It's so beautiful when you do pay attention and find joy in making yourself a little more beautiful and presentable. And as you said, it does bring joy.
Absolutely.
I think it's part of celebrating life. And then something she didn't teach you. You talked about how you come from the culture and a family that was so focused on performance and excellence, and how important it is to learn and to teach our children that failure is okay, that slowing down sometimes is okay. Because, as you said, if we dare to face failure, we will try new things. We will experiment and try new things. And look what beautiful world opened up to you when you tried your new thing with nutrition and spices. I'm glad you did
Correct. Thank you. And I'm gearing up to try more new things. But, you know, that fear of failure is always there. And it's like we talked about earlier, like we just have to move forward and take the steps through despite the fear. Despite the fear.
Acknowledge the fear, accept it, but move in spite of it. So that's a big one. Kanchan, thank you again. We will put your links in the episode notes. I'm inviting my listeners to go and look at your beautiful and inspiring work. And thank you again for being my guest.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was really a pleasure.
If you enjoy Thank You Mama and want to help it grow, please take the 2 seconds to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps. If you'd like to get in touch, you can send me a mail at info@thankyumama.net. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Anna Tider. That's Tajer. This was Thank You Mama. Come back next week, subscribe, and tell your friends.